Now to start building the new centerpiece, which will be the piece with the finger joints to hold the two different types of wood together. I made a set of practice segments for the infill ring that I'm going to build between the two halves. These practice segments will have two jobs. One will be to make sure that I'm making them the right size to make the right radius to fill in the section that I'm filling in. And they will also act as infill pieces to glue up that ring. I got some more padauk and walnut ready to make those segments. And it was the same as before, where the walnut and the padauk need to be the same thickness and the same width. So I set up a fence on the CNC machine so I could put the two types of wood in the same place for each segment that I was going to cut. And I could center the CNC router over that piece of wood and put in the correct bit and get it all set correctly. And I could cut the finger joint or the puzzle piece into the piece of walnut and into the piece of padauk. My practice pieces came in handy sort of as story sticks for this part of the project, so that I knew how big to be making these segments. So I could then use the radial arm saw to cut off each segment. So I'm really just using the CNC machine to do the curvy part that the CNC machine is good at. And then the straight part I can do with the radial arm saw. So once I had it all set up, it was a lot of time cutting all of these, but it wasn't difficult. It was just doing the same thing over and over again. Cutting the curve and then walking over to the radial arm saw and cutting off the piece, and then cutting the next curve, going over the radial arm saw and cutting off the piece, and back and forth and back and forth. So there were 10 segments, so there were 20 different curves to cut and 20 pieces to cut off. But it went just fine, and there weren't any major screw-ups, so it was good. Then it was a matter of gluing the two halves together. And I didn't have to offset the router from the line that I had for the curve. I could just cut the piece on one side of the line, then cut the other piece on the other side of the line, and they seem to go together nice and tight. And I cleaned the pieces up on the disc sander. So the challenge now was to cut an angle into these pieces so that they would fit into a ring. So I set up a clamp on my angle cutting sled just so I could hold a little piece and cut it. I really don't want to have my fingers that close to the blade. And one of the things that was a little bit of a challenge with these is it wasn't just a simple piece. It has a pattern in it that I wanted centered. So there was a lot of trimming off a little bit and flipping it over and cutting the other side and making it centered just exactly right. Then the length of each piece had to be cut so that the width of the ring would be right. When I clamped these together with the extra spacer pieces to get a complete ring, it still seemed just a little bit big for what I was going to need. And I didn't want to shorten the pieces with the pattern in it, because then the pattern wouldn't be right. So what I ended up doing was taking a piece out. So I went from 18 segments to 17 segments, which also meant recutting all the segments with a slightly different angle. It went from 10 degrees to 10.8 degrees, I think. But it worked, and the pattern stayed pretty much to what it was supposed to be. And then I could glue and clamp it together. Now I only glued the pieces with the pattern in them. The white spacer pieces I didn't glue. They're just there to hold the ring. Thanks for watching.